Hi all, welcome brand storytelling community. And thank you so much for joining us today and screening We Are Ayenda. My name is Laura Caracoli. I'm with Montgomery Studios, and I'm really excited to delve into this very timely, high-stakes story about a group of remarkable women. I found this to be a story of survival, of sisterhood, and for our WhatsApp client on the call, the human right to privacy, and really how WhatsApp really helped drive the narrative of this. So I'm so excited to have this conversation with you all. I was so excited to that this doc was selected for the screening. And to start us off, I thought I'd have each of you introduce yourselves. And then after that, we'll go behind the scenes. This audience really wants to go and delve behind the scenes and get a sense of how this partnership brought this remarkable story to life. So Vivian, let's kick it off and have you introduce yourselves.
Great, Laura, thank you for that. And thank you, Brand Storytelling audience. I'm Vivian Odior. I represent the WhatsApp marketing team who was very honored to be a part of this story and excited to share with you how it came about with our great partners here.
Great. Amber?
Hi, my name is Amber Ferris, and I was the director of the film.
Great. And Zach, last but not least.
Hi, everybody. Again, thank you so much. I was the creative director on the project along with my partner, Adam. For the last 5.5 years, we ran the lab at Anonymous Content, where we made this project with Vivian and Amber and the team. Earlier in the fall, we spun out of Anonymous, took the whole operation with us to start a new company called Modern Arts, where we're continuing to work with Vivian and the WhatsApp crew on a bunch of exciting stuff for 2024. But thank you so much, Laura, for leading this. Excited to have the conversation and bring everybody inside the project.
All right, so let's just jump right in. So Zach, how did the idea originate? Like, give us some grounding on who approached who, and put us into a sense of the timing.
So it started with a good old-fashioned brief. A lot of people can't ever believe that, right? That you could do a project like this against a kind of a marketing assignment. But about 2.5 years ago, we started this journey working together with Vivian and some really, really brilliant folks on her team to develop a whole platform around user stories, specifically looking at the role WhatsApp plays in empowering the global diaspora. And so a bunch of strategy went into that for about a year, trying to unpack that, right? And Vivian can speak to this, there are billions of people who use WhatsApp every day. And so to kind of understand how to tell stories that reflect all their amazing experiences, you can imagine that's a long journey. And so over the course of that journey, we really started to, I think, bring into focus a kind of a larger sort of content platform, which ultimately came to life through this idea called True Stories on WhatsApp. And so at that point, we kind of zero in on the platform idea and figure out, okay, that's our kind of enduring IP. How do we express that idea then, right? Up and down funnel, across channels. And then how do we connect it into a product story? And so then that kind of leads you down a different path, which is kind of squaring all those circles to try to find the right stories that can kind of reflect the larger kind of mission of the platform. So it was a long road, but a really, I think, inspiring one, just to see all these amazing stories and to meet all these amazing folks who are using the app to do all this amazing stuff. And along the way, obviously connect with filmmakers like Amber to help figure out how to bring them to life.
And that's kind of amazing to hear, kind of the heavy lifting, the background work, the strategy work, the insight work, because I think often people forget when they kind of see some of these beautiful stories on a lot of the the screenings that we're going to see here, that you forget about all that work that goes behind the scenes to get you to the point where you can bring on Amber, right? So Vivian, do you see WhatsApp's goals? What are WhatsApp's goals as it relates to this platform that Zach just mentioned, which is brilliant and amazing?
Yeah. So, yeah, it's great, Zach, to go back on that journey and realize how long it actually took us to get to the actual point of filming. But the app itself, so we talk about its history. It's been around for over 13 years and now serves over 2 billion users around the world. So arguably one of the world's largest products. And the mission of WhatsApp is to connect the world privately, creating a space for people to be able to be vulnerable, to be true, to connect with one another and build the sense of identity and relationships that they need in life. And one of our, tenets is really this sense of humility. We recognize that for the most part, we're in the background of your life while being, tethered to your life. So highs and lows happen on WhatsApp. Good news is received on WhatsApp. Devastating news is received on WhatsApp. WhatsApp unlocks communities, missions, goals for people. We get to be a part of so much. But because of how we're built and this privacy element, we don't always have the ability to see it. So in the most recent years, marketing has come on board to help shed a light on the role that we play. And I call it taking WhatsApp from a head appreciating your head, to truly appreciating in your heart, taking it from back of mind to front of mind. And the best way to do that is actually put the hand of storytelling, in the hands of our users themselves. Talk about the moments that we've gotten to be a part of. And so that's what we knew we needed and what we wanted. Like, one of our goals is to make sure we stand the test of time because people can remember why WhatsApp is important to them and we're not just a utility. So when we approached Zach and Adam, what we were really asking them to do was help us tell our story by finding groups of people around the world who, through the use of WhatsApp, really were able to, accomplish something or feel something and help us point out some of those moments. And they started to do the hard work of not only getting us to an IP, but saying, here's how you package that for the long term. So our user stories are going to be an enduring part of our mission, because then we don't have to talk about ourselves. Our users can talk about themselves.
Amazing.
Yeah, I think that's the thing ultimately that gets us excited when we think about these kinds of projects is you're trying to create, enduring IP that can scale. And so that, that comes to life as kind of big ideas, right? In this case, true stories on WhatsApp that then can translate, across a content ecosystem, right? That can live in some cases as a half-hour documentary that's going to be on streaming, but then in other cases as a 3 or 4 minute mini doc, or in other cases, maybe it comes to life as a roundtable discussion, right? With different members of the diaspora talking about their experiences. Maybe it's a podcast, but it all ladders back into this larger narrative idea that, again, we can continue to iterate on for a long time, because it all ties back into what Vivian was just saying, which is this authentic experience that users have every day on the app.
Yeah, so let's talk specifically about what we just all saw and witnessed, which is an amazing story. And before I bring Amber into this conversation, for Zach and Vivian, it's really important to bring the right team on board to help really express that story that you found. So, how did you guys find Amber, and how did you align on the director? Were there certain characteristics or things that you were looking for? And Amber, you can close your ear. No,
I'm really curious to
talk
hear
about but I'm just curious because sometimes you just go through a list of directors and you go, let's just pick one. But I think it's important when you're telling these human stories that are so so personal, that you need to find the right person. So let me find out how you guys all landed and found Amber.
So whenever we start these projects, we try to assemble the Avengers, right? Look across entertainment, all of our relationships, and figure out who's best fit to kind of tell this story. And so early on, we knew that we wanted to tap into our relationships with folks who come from the world of Vice News. So we brought in a great story researcher named Laura Heinz, who was a Peabody winner there, journalist, producer. She's actually the one who dug up the story and kind of found it initially and did the initial outreach and sort of story produced it early on. And then we brought in an amazing producer on our side, Amanda Nassim, who also comes from the world of Vice. And together, sort of with the help from some of our kind of partners at Anonymous, just looked across the storytelling world to find filmmakers who had a very unique set of experiences that would allow them to be able to connect with young women like the girls who are at the center of our story. I think one of the things that you realize early on is that this is a very vulnerable situation you're putting these girls in. And so we were looking for a filmmaker who had experience working with young women who come from a similar set of circumstances, who have been in this sort of storytelling environment before, so that they could create conditions or create an atmosphere that would allow those girls or these subjects to feel comfortable enough to share their story. And so we'd all seen this amazing documentary that Amber made called Speed Sisters, and I'll let her speak to it in just a second. But we loved it and knew that just from that experience alone, she had all of the tools as a storyteller, but more importantly, like as a human being, to be able to get into a room with these young women and again, like create conditions for them to want to share. And so it's really a casting exercise, right? When you're thinking about filmmakers, you're thinking about who is the right person, yes, sure, to tell the story, but more importantly, who's going to connect with your subjects in a way that's going to allow the story to come to life in the best way possible.
And thank you.
I do want to say, Amber, we talked to lots of filmmakers, and you know that, but like the connection that we all had to you the first time we got on a Zoom like this, it was like the easiest choice we could have ever made. Because again, like you had that thing, that like innate thing, the confidence to be like, oh no, I know how to do this. Like I know how to interact with these. I know how to engage these young women. I know how to tell their story. And so I don't think I've ever told you that in person, but like it's a real thing. Like it was the easiest decision we've ever made. And same thing when we connected with Vivian and the team. It was like, here's this filmmaker. Here's all the reasons why we think she's the perfect fit. And we had a green light like before we even got off the call.
That's good. Why did you put me through all that work to pitch then?
That experience.
You know,
Before you jump in, sorry, Amber, while we're congratulating and thanking you for the work you did, I will say, like, outside of the functional reasons why you were the right person, right? So we'd seen your work. We knew that you were going to be able to like deliver a story that really married past and present, and like this sense of like really helping people feel the tension, but feel, you know, the joy as part of the story and the future and the hope that we were hoping, and open up the girls. I will say, like, there was a strong sense of personal vision and passion. So you came to the table with like, this is my vision for how this works and how this helps all the parties involved, but also a very collaborative sense. It's never easy when you're trying to honor storytelling and then you're also trying to honor some business objectives. And I think you had the right balance. Laura called it out earlier. It's like a story of survival and sisterhood. We could have gone to sisterhood. We could have gone to survival, but I felt like because of your collaborative energy, we got to where those two came together. So excited to hear how you felt coming to the table as well.
You know what? I just want to share, thank you, Zach, and to Vivian for sharing kind of like the work, because I want to show people that you have to go through the whole process to really find the right person to help bring your story and that team together. So Amber, you have such an impressive list of credits, and I'm excited to talk to you about this. Was this the first time that you've worked with a brand partner?
Yeah, as a filmmaker, though my past life was in advertising, so I had like some like understanding of it in Canada also. So it was like not as, you know, amazing of brands as WhatsApp, but but I had an understanding of that, what that relationship is like. But from a filmmaking perspective, no, it was for sure, it was the first time that I was able to work with a brand.
And how did you find this?
I was just gonna say that's another reason why we went in the direction of Amber, and all the filmmakers actually that we talked to had never worked with a brand before. And I think one of the things that we've learned over the years is when you're tapping into the brain power of folks who come from across entertainment and not necessarily advertising, they bring this like beginner's mind to the project. And they don't have a lot of the baggage, right, that a lot of filmmakers might have, having made lots of commercial work. And so they're much more open to a collaboration. And I think they come to the table with a lot of different kinds of ideas on how we can solve some of these problems.
So how did you find this whole collaborative process, Amber? Was it different than other things you've worked on? Were there any nuances that made it more interesting to you of how you had to kind of work? I mean, the amazing thing about the story is the WhatsApp brand helped drive this whole story forward and was telling kind of some of the heart of the story. How did you find that whole process and the balance?
The process was really great. I wasn't really sure what to expect when sort of Zach and the team approached me, and sort of the process for it was, they were like, this is a story that that we want to tell. How would you tell it? So part of that like pitching process that I was joking about before, which was actually incredibly useful, was to sit down and think about like how could I tell this story and really engage in it before I was even, that they had even selected me. I was already thinking about it. I think because it was, the interesting parts of it for me was like, I understood their story, and I liked the way that WhatsApp was like, really, the brand was part of the story in such a organic way. Like, it wasn't like you were trying to force this thing into a story. It was really, it actually became a really great story device for us. It actually helped carry the story through. And then in terms of the process, like it was really collaborative, which I loved. Zach and the team, and Adam were really great. Zach was like a great like creative partner. Just him and I did a lot of scripting, which for me, coming from the doc world, there were a lot of elements in it that were really new to me. One was like, because of the timeline was so quick, like I think it was like 2.5 months from the time that I was that I started on the project to when we delivered it. It was 2.5, maybe 3 months. So it was like very, very quick. So we had to really be, sometimes in documentary, you have the luxury of like, let's kind of see what the story or where it takes us. We had to be very precise in what it was that we were filming. And so there was a lot of scripting that was going on, which I don't always do, to this level in filmmaking. And then as well as the crew that we had, like it was definitely a budget that was bigger than any project that I had worked on, especially for like a short film. And that what that allowed was just really just an elevation of the types of people that we were working with. The cinematographer, it was a full crew, which is something I had worked on but not to that extent. And there was like elements that we were able to, do some recreations, which again, from a filmmaker perspective, for me was amazing, because I never have budget to have a set designer, like that's just not something that, that I've had access to. So it really allowed me to exercise some different creative elements of filmmaking. So, and I feel like I've come out of it as a much better filmmaker, and just have like a broader set of skills than I did going in.
Well, Amber, you touched on a moment of reenactments, and this kind of struck me when I was watching it, because I wanted to talk about, you guys did a good job of balancing news footage, the interviews, and then I realized there were reenactments. And Vivian, I was going to ask you this specifically, having worked with brands in the past, when you think about reenactments, sometimes brands feel like it's inauthentic, or are we going to go back and how will this look? I think Amber and the team and Zach did an amazing job making those feel. They were woven in so well. It wasn't until after the fact when I just started putting on my story hat and my producer hat going, oh wow, those were recreations. Like it didn't take me out of the moment. But how did you feel as the brand? Was that the decision you guys all came to together? And how was that decision made?
Yeah, it definitely wasn't like without any fear, I would say, from my part. So the great thing about, I would say, the marketing team is we span generations of marketers. So I would say, like, I have some old school residual, like, no inauthentic, no reenactments. I was very nervous. I will say, once we met Amber, like in the first conversation, that was what she made me feel most comfortable about, that she could weave past and present together in a way that just didn't feel like overwhelmingly about archival footage or overwhelmingly about, reenactments or overwhelmingly about just face the camera. She was going to find the right balance to keep you hooked and keep you interested. And some of the amazing women on my team, Gada and Sophie, I think they just had like that leap of faith, just being so deep in the weeds and in the project and spending even more time with Amber. And so they were convincing me. And then as we started to edit, or actually as they filmed the girls take you so much into that moment that I feel like it would have been a miss to not additionally take the audience there. So it's not just something you're hearing, but it's really something that you're employing the rest of your senses. And so to me, it nailed the goal. It really was like that whole concept of from head to heart. We wouldn't have got there if we hadn't had some of those reenactments. So, and the team did it beautifully.
I just want to unpack a little bit of what you said. The girls took us into those moments. So Amber, you just did an incredible job with those interviews, and you got the girls to really share and relive things that were probably really hard for them to talk about. There's one moment that always struck me when we have to talk about the other lead in the story, Farkuda. Because when she told them you can bring 3 family members in one backpack, and all of a sudden it kind of hits you like a ton of bricks. Like, these girls have to pack their lives and decide things and put it in one backpack. And that when the one girl talks about all the medals and how proud she was, but if she put them in her backpack, they'd be too heavy and she couldn't run. So give us a little bit of like, how do you construct those interviews to make to bring out all those stories? That was amazing.
Well, thank you, first of all. And I wanted to just mention something about those reenactments that was quite funny. Is after my father watched the film, he's like, "When did you go to Afghanistan?" I was like,
You did a great job.
Anyways, yeah, I think for me, I've spent a lot of time working with refugee populations. I lived in the West Bank and Palestine for 7 years and have done a lot of filming within that community. And one of the important things about this film was to tell just that. Like, I wanted people to understand that refugees aren't born refugees. Like, you're not really a refugee until you're forced out of your home, or you're forced to make that decision to leave. And before that, you're just carrying on with your life and thinking where you're living was going to, is where you'll always live. And I really wanted that to come across in the interviews with them, in terms of the questions and stuff and I was asking. And I think because I've had that, my family, I am Muslim and Arab. And so I think just in that, that helped them really feel comfortable around me, and just really having an understanding and a deep empathy for what they had that they had been through. We did interviews prior to pre-interviews, and in those pre-interviews I did find a lot of those details, the details about the medals, the details about Fatima's story about when she goes back to the place of home, which was her kicking the ball around, and looking back at all of her family. Like those were all things that came out in the pre-interview, and I was able to draw them out in front of the camera. But I think it is really important, and as a filmmaker, you often are asked to create these intimate stories in a very short timeline, and so us having to make that connection, like who's behind that camera, is like so important, because it allows people to feel like I made an instant connection with them, and I understood how to do that. I knew, I've worked in those environments before, and I know the types of things that they'll connect to about myself, and just creating that environment that makes them feel safe enough to be able to to trust you is really important. So like I really give a lot of credit to Zach and the team, and Vivian and the team to really seek out a filmmaker that had that type of connection to the story, because often that doesn't really get taken into consideration. And I think it really does make a big difference.
You can see why it was so easy to hand the keys to Amber. Like it is how the first call we had went, and you're just like, yep.
How did the process work? Did you have folks that were with Amber while she was producing? Zach, did you have your teams there? Tell us like how that process worked. And were you editing as you were shooting? Were you building the story? Each you kind of can build these different ways, collect all your footage and figure out your story, and story editors that way. But maybe Zach, you can take us and Vivian a little bit behind the scenes, just so that everybody can understand the roles that you guys played in building the story with Amber.
Yeah, so Amber touched on it, but it started with a bunch of pre-interviews, getting on Zooms like this in a really small, intimate group. First with Farkunda, who is the hero of the story, in my opinion.
Amazing.
And each of the girls, and just talking about their experiences. And then from that, kind of developing like a roadmap of like, okay, this is how we think we tell this story. And Amber really drove that. And then as we moved into production, we realized, okay, in order to meet our August deadline, which was really meant to kind of harness the energy around the Women's World Cup, we knew we had to move quickly. And so we actually shot in 2 waves. Our team, including all the WhatsApp folks and Amber, we all went to Portugal for a week and spent a couple of days with the girls shooting their interviews, getting their stories, shooting a couple of the ideas we had for recreations. And then we went back and we edited for about 2 weeks and started to kind of piece together the puzzle. And then we would incorporate some of the pre-interview stuff that we had on Zoom with Farkunda into that kind of like rough assembly, and then use that to inform the second shoot when everyone went back to Portugal and interviewed Farkunda to kind of get her perspective on the story, and then pick up some of the other details from the girls that we know we still wanted to cover. And then all that great stuff of them and their teammates coming together, playing soccer, like that all happens right in that second shoot. And so because we were kind of working in parallel, we're able to deliver, obviously, like in this crazy condensed timeline, but you're also able to build a story in a really, I think, efficient way. Because you know kind of going into that second shoot where the holes are and what you need to try to get. And then that sets you up for success as you're on that last sprint, those few weeks, trying to get it all put together to deliver to Amazon.
And Vivian, how was you watching how the brand was being kind of, integrated into this story, and being kind of watchful of, I mean, obviously it's a private platform, so you were extracting content, and I'm sure with permission. Tell me a little bit about that, how the brand, brought the story to life.
Yeah. So for me, it was and for the team, it was really, there was 3 things or 3 kind of junctures that we were looking for the brand and the product to show up. So the first thing that had to be real is like when Zach and team first brought the story to us, and we're spending an incredible amount of time researching, talking to, the teams, like the girls, Farkunda. It was very important that in the memory or in the storytelling of what had happened to them, that the role of WhatsApp was natural to them. So I think that was the first part, because the story could have existed where it's like, yes, all this stuff happened on WhatsApp, but in their memory, the importance of WhatsApp or the natural occurrence of WhatsApp in the conversation isn't there. And then we're constantly feeding, like, was privacy important? How did you get that? How did you know where to meet? And then that ruins it, right? And so I think part of why we were so excited in the beginning was, no, it's there. There's an appreciation for it, because like what came from that moment for them was the thing that we tout, the thing that we care about the most, which was privacy. So then that second tenet was, in the storytelling, is it coming true that, the right to privacy is important? Because that's what we build the entire app around. And so even without necessarily the girls telling, bringing up WhatsApp, you could tell that moment where life became in danger or was in question, their ability to connect with one another, with Farkunda, like their life depended on it. And so that was sort of like really showcasing that. And then therefore our functional role through the actual experience leading to the fact that there was progress and emotional outcome on the other side of privacy. That was the third tenet, that was going to happen in the way we told the story. Those were the things, those were the beats we were looking for. So the natural part of the story and their memory and experience, the fact that privacy is a fundamental right in that sense. And then with privacy, there's progress and emotions. And then through that, you know, we left it to the storytellers to help us find the right ways for that to come through. And the visual device, like what was the right times for us to show up in the story.
Like
Yeah.
those three elements that Vivian just hit on, like that's the stuff that we figured out a year before, right? In the strategy piece of it, right? So like that's why it's so important to lay that foundation so that when you do step into a story like this, everyone's on the same page about how we are going to tell it, and also like what success looks like at the end of that experience. Without that clarity and the strategy that kind of underpins all that, you're sort of lost, right? You're just kind of trying to figure it out as you go. But in this case, we didn't have that. We were all in lockstep from the beginning.
And Vivian, so just because we're kind of starting to land on this a little bit, how do you measure success? Like you have all the guardrails and all the strategy work that you worked on with Zach and was that kind of your guidepost to kind of be able to kind of check that list of like, hey, this is how we're going to measure success? Because I think in the brand community, we all struggle with that notion of when you're having to want to do more projects and having to go and unlock budgets or get consensus and socialize this and want to do more. How do you measure success and kind of share that internally?
Yeah, I would say maybe just starting from a much softer side, I think there is power in the culture building and company pride that comes from saying, here's the reality of what we do. You know, we come to work every day, but here's it in real life, which surprisingly, or not surprisingly, because we don't actually know what's happening in your messages, we don't get a lot of access to. And so there's that like kind of very human, softer side where like pride happens and it's a very powerful tool for us internally. From a brand performance perspective, we definitely ensured that it was part of our overall, we kind of had a window of talking about the specific tenet of privacy. And so that's the other reason we picked August, landing, tied to Women's World Cup, but also in the umbrella of this specific privacy campaign we were able to measure sort of like, does this create an uptick in that moment, a surge in mentions of linking us with privacy, reinforcing positive sentiment on privacy. So we measure sentiment there, and really kind of like boost that entire campaign effort. And it's been extremely positive and obviously very proud that we were able to do this.
Amazing. And Amber, is there advice in future projects of brands that you would give to brands that want to kind of venture into the doc space?
Yeah, like I think one of the things that I was so amazed by in WhatsApp is like that they gave me a lot of creative freedom. Like I didn't feel like I was like having like handcuffed to tell a certain story in a certain way. There was they gave me a lot of freedom. There was a lot of confidence that I was going to be able to tell the girl's story. And then, in terms of how the brand and how the product was actually used or seen, like that's really where they came in with a lot of like feedback, rightfully so, but it didn't affect the actual like storytelling, which I thought was like really amazing, because I think I had gone into this sort of thinking it could go like sort of either way, but I was really pleasantly surprised that that I was really able to tell the story that I wanted to tell. And I think for brands that are trying to get into the space, it's a really scary thing to be able to put that much faith into a filmmaker, into a film team. But I think that the reward, the product is that much better, because it comes across as so much more authentic. And that's what audiences are looking for. Audiences don't want to see a brand like sort of, like stuffed into a story. And I think like I mean, you've mentioned that. I think that there was a really nice balance in this film, and there was a really authentic story that was told. So I guess that's like sort of the biggest advice that I have.
And Zach, is there advice on the kind of when brands want to venture into this kind of story-driven narrative, advice that you would give them overall based on your experience coming out of this experience?
I mean, across all of the stuff that we've made with brands, I think the fundamental thing is trust. I think the filmmaking team has to obviously be trusted by the clients, but at the same time, the filmmaking team has to trust the clients, right? The filmmaking team has to trust that if we invite the clients into the creative process, that their feedback is going to also be helping to serve the story. And so I think when you establish that trust, which goes back to what we were talking about earlier, in like finding the right filmmaker, right? Doing that hard work of like finding the right person and building the right story, it creates that trust on both sides. And if you have that trust on both sides, there are inevitably going to be hard decisions that have to get made in these kinds of processes. It's a lot easier to get everyone on the same page about those decisions and keep the train moving if you have that trust. I think the other biggest thing, and it all ties together, is just communication. I think you have to be super transparent, but at the same time, like, it really comes down to like account management, right? Like creating dialogue, right? Creating spaces for the clients and the filmmaking team to have conversations. And again, like keep everyone on the same page. If you have trust and great communication, you can find lots of success here. But the moment you remove one of those things from the equation, the whole thing falls apart every single time. So I think that would be my big note, is like find filmmakers you trust and get those filmmakers to trust the clients and their objectives, and then get everyone on the same page and marching in the same direction.
Is there any moment that you guys can all speak to that maybe something went a little sideways on the project? Because I don't think, when you look at the final project, the final outcome, it all looks amazing and beautiful, but we know so much goes into creating that half hour. Is there any particular moment that went sideways and what you did to kind of right track it, or any learnings coming out of that you can share? Or was it just the timing issue, maybe?
I mean, I look back at it, and I mean, you all probably have a different perspective, but for me, like, it was the ticking clock of the Women's World Cup, right? And knowing that, like, we were trying to take advantage of this larger umbrella, right, that Vivian was talking about around global privacy, and take advantage of that campaign, but also like show up at that moment in culture. So there's this pressure, right, on all the decisions you're making, particularly in post, to get it all right quickly so that you can make that delivery date. But I'm curious, I mean, Amber, I'm sure there were things, Vivian, I'm sure there were things that were going on that I had no idea about, where you felt like things might have gone sideways.
I don't know that they went sideways either. I do think that maybe because of the time pressure, there were some times, where we might have been coming at things from like a different angle, where it felt like rushed conversation in order to hear, both sides. And sometimes that was, how much should the UI or the interface actually show up in the film? Or even, what music choice are we making here? Like, I feel like, given the beauty of time, those conversations we might have lingered on them more, but it was probably like more tense in the way that we were discussing those elements, but they never felt like, oh, things have gone sideways.
Yeah, sometimes I think on the entertainment side, when you're producing, things just go by. You just got to make split-second decisions, and you don't get that kind of ability to socialize and get more, points of views. But you guys did an amazing job. I just have to ask, and I'm sure everybody wants to ask this question: how are the girls? How are they today? How are their lives? Are they in Portugal?
Yeah, do you want me to answer that?
Yeah, feel free.
Anybody. I mean, I just want to know that they're okay.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, they are. They're in Portugal right now. Sorry, this cat is like great.
Wants to know how are the girls also.
Wants to know how the girls are.
Yeah. The girls are in Portugal. They're back at high school now. Their families are still trying to adapt to living in Portugal. It's hard. It's a language that's completely foreign to them, and you know, and I think that they're still they're struggling to make that transition, but they're, you know, I think the Portuguese society has been quite open with them, and I think that they're doing well, and they're still playing. They're playing on their sort of soccer. They're either high school or like city soccer teams, and then Farkunda is still very involved with them. She's living in Holland and playing for a club team, a professional club team there, and she's still very, very much involved. So
I love that you asked that question, Laura. I know we're getting close to time here, but it was, I would say, maybe something that changed or sparked as the closer the team got to the girls and Amber got to the girls was we couldn't leave the story making people feel like it was a completely neat bow or not wondering, you know, like what happened to the girls. We wanted to leave the door open to continue to bring the spotlight back to them and help them forward. Because getting to the other side is not it's actually the beginning of another very hard journey. And so I don't want to like expose sort of like the intimate conversations that different team members have kept with the girls and with Farkunda, but WhatsApp team definitely as people and as a brand are very committed to making sure that we just continue with sort of like involvement and engagement there, because we learned a lot. And I think we're personally moved by their strength and their resilience.
One of my favorite experiences of the whole project was we premiered it in New York on the eve of the Women's World Cup. Abby Wambach was there, and we were able to fly the three girls from Portugal to New York City.
Right.
They spent a week, 5 days in New York. And at that point, the girls had been on two flights in their lives, right? The flight to leave Afghanistan to arrive in Portugal, and then the flight to fly from Portugal to New York City.
Yeah.
And so to be able to like be there for that experience and kind of see it through their eyes, and really feel like, you know, you had helped, I think, open up their world, I think, and hopefully, you know, that's a metaphor for bigger things that await them. But such a beautiful thing to be able to share with them and the rest of the team, because it's not often when you're doing these kinds of projects that you can, you know, affect people's lives or be around people who are going through this kind of transition and sort of see how it's changing them.
Well, I just want to applaud and thank you all for bringing such like a high stakes emotional story, especially given the light of current events. It's just really, you know, you really brought us into what it feels like to be a refugee, and that communication and the brand just driving that story forward through those communications was just it was really kind of changing when you see that final film. So thank you all. I applaud you all. And I look forward to the future collaborations. Maybe the next one, I was telling Zach, maybe it'll be a love story and something else. So, but I'm looking forward to more true stories from WhatsApp team. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks
Bye.
so much, guys.
Thanks.
Bye, everyone.
Take care.